Welcome back to Sitting in Jams. It's a delight to be in your ear holes this morning for another episode. Why don't we start off by just telling everybody, how has your morning been? My morning has been grand. Got up, had a run, took care of some business, and Callum and I enjoyed a coffee together. Callum, how's your morning been?
Morning's been really good. Yeah, done some nice reading just before we met, which I mentioned. And then we had a good catch up and a good bit of prep for today's question.
Go on then, Jack. Tell us how's your morning been? Keep it concise.
Uh, my radiator blew up this morning, so I'm in a new background. But I've had a bit of a crazy morning. But it's actually just nice to be sitting down and talking about something interesting today. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Nice one. Great. Just before we get started, I would like to say a massive thank you to everybody who has been checking out the podcast so far on Spotify, iTunes, and watching it on YouTube. I appreciate you all. And a huge thank you to everybody who's been checking out the merch. I saw that James Thane on Instagram posted a photo of his mug, and that was so nice to see. So thanks so much for the support, James. We all really appreciate that. If you would like to support the podcast, you can get the merchandise from our Teespring or Spring website, which is linked below on wherever you're listening to this. You can use discount code GuitarFuel for 20% off for the foreseeable future. I think we'll run that until next year, the beginning of next year. And yeah, if you would like to submit a question for the podcast, because remember, this is about us and you, please send us a message on either Instagram or send us an email at sittinginpodcast@gmail.com. All right? Cool. That's enough for me. Over to Callum Stevenson, who will be hosting this week's question.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. So today's question is going to be, should you go to music school? Kind of follow-up question to that. What was your personal experience, and did it meet your expectations? So starting off, I had zero expectations when I went into college. Didn't know what I was going for. I basically just decided to go into a space where there was music. That was essentially it. And through the 5 years that I studied there, things kind of slowly and gradually began to take shape. So I think that's the kind of first thing to mention, is that you might have some expectations, you might have zero expectations, but neither of those, you might not meet your expectations at all, which is completely fine, because again, it takes shape over time. But my personal experience with it was quite an interesting one, because a lot of things that I thought would maybe have importance didn't have as much importance. And yeah, a lot of things that I viewed in music and what was important to my education in music changed. So one of the things that I ended up doing a lot was I spent so much time just using the facilities, because I didn't have the facilities at home. So I would be, I think it was in second or third year, I was the first person to walk in the building. I was the last person to leave, basically, before, I was the first person to put the lights on. So that I could use those facilities and really take advantage of the recording facilities that they had there. Just to spend a lot of time being creative, getting used to digital audio workstations as well. And yeah, just trying to develop my musical experience in a lot of kind of diverse ways, I suppose. But one of the things that I didn't think of it at the time, but the thing that I would probably put most importance on was building relationships, just building relationships with other like-minded musicians.
I just want to say, Callum, that you might have been the first person in and out, but little did you know, I was actually hiding in the toilets crying because I had so many jazz transcriptions to learn. So I was actually secretly there. And for those of you who don't know, Callum and I actually studied at the same place, but didn't actually cross paths until well after, which is kind of bizarre. But anyway, I just want to add that in there, Callum.
No, that's true. That's definitely true. It is weird that our paths didn't cross initially. I find that quite odd. But yeah, one of the things that I'm really grateful for, and is something that I tell a lot of students, is I was very much in the deep end when I started, because there was a lot of great musicians. and a lot of diverse musicians, people who were just kind of further along that musical path than me. I was very limited in my musical ability when I first started, so being in amongst lots of great musicians at quite a high level really shaped me as a musician over the course of the 5 years. And it's something that I say to students, which sounds quite nasty, but I always tell them, I hope you're the worst person and you're here. And that, like, there's a good reason for that. It comes from good intentions, because, you know, I think many of us know that if you want to be like a great player, for example, like a great performer, you need to really be in the environment of a lot of great players to kind of push you out those kind of safe spaces, I suppose, or like a comfortable kind of place. I think you'll find you grow so much more, and there's a lot more to gain when you have people who just show you a new thing, just with like just even like one sentence that they say, or just maybe one take on a chorus, maybe just one take on a chorus that they do, and you're kind of super inspired by just something as small as that. You realize that you're kind of you've got a long way to go. Essentially, I would say that you've got a long way to go. But that's essentially kind of in a nutshell, quite quickly, what my experience was like at college. Reese, what about yours?
Yeah, nice one, Callum. I certainly agree with you in terms of making use of the facility, particularly the toilets, and also, yeah, just making sure that you're, striving to be as good as you can in the environment you're in. But yeah, college for me was a funny one because I'll tell you a wee bit of story. I actually applied for a different course, and I remember I didn't get in, and I was super bummed out. I was like 17, like just a baby, right? And yeah, I didn't get into this course that I thought I would. And the most annoying part, honestly, was that my best mate, who honestly wasn't any better than me, he got in. And I remember thinking about what the difference could have been. And he told me that in his audition, his nose started to bleed. And they got him to lie down on the toilet. I'm thinking about toilet too much now. Lie down on the floor and pinch his nose. And I think that he got in because he had a nosebleed and I didn't. But anyway, when I did get into college eventually, I didn't get into the course I wanted to get into, and so I just went somewhere else basically. And to be honest, I'm so grateful I did, because I think this was a 4-year course instead of a 3-year course. And what it afforded me was a year to kind of work out what I wanted to do, because I had no idea. I went straight from high school, and all I knew is that I like to play guitar and just flashy stuff. I was playing Joe Satriani and all that kind of stuff, which is great. But I had no idea what I really wanted to get out of college. And so the first year really afforded me that opportunity to explore options. And I found within about the first 6 months that I was really interested in improvisation. And that kind of led me down this pathway of exploring blues music and funk music, and eventually onto kind of fusion and jazz stuff. And yeah, I guess my point there is that I went into it with, in some ways, no expectations, and used it as an opportunity just to find out what my path is. Because I think it's hard as a 16 or like 17, 18-year-old kid to know really what you want to get out of an experience. And so for me, the first few years of university were really about finding my path, or finding paths, and like just going down them for a bit and just trying out loads of different stuff. But another thing that I would like to comment on in terms of going to college is making use of your tutors. And what I realized, and I don't know if you guys feel the same, but in an environment like college, where it's very different to school, where your teachers, there's a huge barrier between you and your teachers. Like, they're professional, you're the little kid learning from them. But college was a little bit different. It was the first place in an educational environment I was kind of treated like an adult. And I found out quite quick that if I got on well with my tutors, particularly my guitar tutors, they would somehow have more time for me. And for someone who was a really keen student and, always wanting to develop, that was great for me, because it meant that I would get emails from my teachers if they had like cancellations or anything, like, oh, do you fancy just like another lesson on Tuesday or whatever? I was like, yeah, of course. And I found out that the 45-minute lessons we were supposed to have became 2-hour lessons, just because they were nice, and they were. I also showed a different level of enthusiasm maybe. And I guess the point there is, going into an educational situation, it's like respecting those who are teaching you, but also realizing that the environment's very different from school and that they might have more time for you. They might give you a gig, or they might give you extra time, or just different types of feedback. And I found that to be super useful. The final thing I just want to comment on before passing over to Jack is the importance of networking in that environment. And it's funny, I mentioned that having not known Callum when he was at school the same time as me. I think you were the year above me. But I met so many great people and started so many bands and done lots of recording sessions just because I was there and I let people know that I was up for it. And that might be by just having a jam with someone, or even like helping someone out with some work maybe that you were a bit better at, and vice versa. Maybe they'd be able to help you with something in the future. But yeah, it was a funny sort of experience for me, because I really went into college thinking, kind of feeling let down that I didn't go to the place I wanted to go. But in the end, it ended up being the complete best thing for me, because it afforded me time to think about what I want to do. So I guess my advice off of that is, if you're thinking about going to music school, consider your options in terms of where you're going, but don't be too disheartened if you don't get into where you want to go, because wherever you go at the end of the day, it is all about what you make of it. I could have been studying at another place and gotten a worse experience. I don't know, but it's like what I made out of it is the really the important thing there. But yeah, I think that's about enough from me. Over to Jack.
That's great to hear. That, it's funny, just as you two were talking, I've never actually heard of your experience in music school as well, and I resonate a lot with both of what you said as well. For me, I always realized that going to music school was about being given time. So if you either have had the experience or perhaps you're wondering about music school, this is essentially my own personal experience of it, but I really felt that I gained time when I came through the doors. So I went to a university in London, and very much like you, Reese, I didn't really know what it was I wanted to do. I had a general idea about wanting to improve the guitar as well, and sort of go down the jazz route as well, and increase my knowledge that way. But really after that, I had no idea how to construct a career or what I would do with it. I should say as well, like you said, being 17 or 18 and choosing your options for where you want to go for university is such a young age, really. But you're very quickly, asked to find value in certain things, I suppose, in terms of what is it that you want to do, or what is it that you want to explore as well. And something that I knew I really wanted to do was actually not to just study music. I wanted to have access to all kinds of things that the university would offer. And unfortunately, being part of the University of London, it's a big, I'm not sure if conglomerate is the right word, but it's part of a group of schools, the University of London. So I was somebody who's always interested in the history of things, the philosophy of things, and being able to dip and dive out of those topics was really good for me as well, whilst also being able to continue performance and use London to its fullest potential. So for me, music school was mostly about time. It was absolutely about, creating connections and finding out about myself and improving as well. All of those great things. But really what I felt music school brought out in me the most was just this large amount of time for me to go and just explore things, whether it was exploring information, different topics, all that sort of thing. And my degree itself was rather unconventional. I mean, very strange, because I went to a university rather than a conservatoire. So 3 out of 4 of my subjects, if you like, or however many of my topics, were based on essay writing and being really assured about what it is that I thought about, say, the aesthetics or philosophy of music, or the history of music as well. So I had some really great lectures talking about, say, the history of music in Soviet Russia as well, or how music plays a role in the West and in education, all those kind of things. So I felt like I had a really full understanding of things. And as you know, the years went on and I got to the later stages of my education, I really felt that I wanted to specialize more in sort of the teaching side and the performance side as well, and the playing side. And so I put more and more time into that. And, like you say, Callum, as well, and I can completely resonate with that, being the first in and the last out as well, to the point that you start, knowing about the security guards and how their families are and all that kind of thing, and they're shooing you away saying, hey, haven't you got a life to get on with? But, again, I factor all of that in as part of time, really. And I had a really great experience meeting people who had lots of different disciplines, lots of different interests as well. and also challenged me in ways both musically and I suppose personally as well, that influenced how I think and how I am as a musician as well. And so I thought it was very important. But something I thought would be helpful to anybody who is thinking about music school or going off to music school or considering it at least, or perhaps you've been, or perhaps you're in it as well and you're trying to figure all this stuff out. I think it is probably one of the cold hard truths of music school that music, if you want to be in the music industry, if you want to be in, the music scene, if you like, there's a couple of important distinctions to really make and to understand about music school. Number one being that music is a vocational degree. And I think all of you would agree with me in saying that your grade really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's about what you pick up from music school. So unless you are looking for, a position in commercial industry as well, which is absolutely fine, or perhaps you're looking to change your major or your study, most of the time, if you're going there as a musician wanting to be a performer or a producer or an engineer or a mixer, or whatever it is that you want to do, composer, then I suppose that's a really big thing to remember, is just go out there and make a bunch of mistakes. Go with the notion that music school is a platform to build upon rather than a platform to simply just find your next destination. I think the thing that I learned about the music school and the music industry in general is the main thing, that the music scene is not an industry. It does rely on, contacts and who it is that and what it is that you're willing to do as well. What it is that you're willing to try and what it is that you're willing to really work hard at as well. And the more that you can craft, I suppose, a vision for what it is that you want to do with your career as well, the more it starts to make sense. But, my general advice in that scenario as well, and I'm saying this both to anybody listening and to me as well, is just try as much as you can, explore the city and get a real feel for what the scene is as well. Oftentimes, I think it's really important that the distinction is made that music school doesn't teach you how to value yourself or your skill or your speciality. And it's more about kind of giving you the transactional information and knowledge, but it's really down to what you want to do with it. And it's no surprise that it's a tough industry. That's the honest truth. All three of us understand that as well. And it continues to be tough. But if you are somebody who is naturally curious and, music school is something that still appeals to you, you still want to be in that environment of being challenged, having opportunities, meeting really interesting people, and really, I suppose, having every day that is different. Your office always changes or your situation might change, then you should go right ahead and continue it. But, on that experience then, or that relay of my experience, what kind of expectations did you guys have going into music school? Callum, I know you said you didn't have any, but Reese, I'm wondering, did you have any expectations at all?
Yeah, I had very, very unrealistic expectations. And this is something I used to struggle with a lot. And the expectation for me was not necessarily on the process of being at college itself. I was quite fine with just passing myself into the hands of the tutors, and they would guide me down pathways and I'd explore it all. But my issue was that, and I'm not entirely sure where this came from, but when I was 18, let's say, I'd settled into university. And by the way, just for those of you who are listening, we're using the term school, college, and university, conservatoire. We mean the same thing, right? But I had this unrealistic expectation of the level that was expected of you to get through a degree. When I first got to college, I thought, I'm not kidding, I thought that people who were in the last year of their degree would be world-class musicians, and I thought they would be just the best players ever. And I'm not entirely, I think that affected me in that I put that expectation on myself, not to be a world-class player necessarily, but I felt bad about myself a lot because I was constantly comparing myself to something that didn't actually exist, which is kind of funny. And I remember my mum always saying to me, it's oh, Reese, look at how far you've come, just appreciate that. And I was like, Mum, I need to get better because they're world-class, you don't understand. But they weren't world class, and the reality is that you can get a degree in music and still be pretty rubbish at playing guitar. You can, that's fine. You might specialize in something else. But yeah, my expectations, or unrealistic expectations for that matter, came from the level I thought was expected of me. And sort of to conclude that, it's you'll be surprised. It's there's a pathway for everybody at music school, and there will be one for you that fits in with the kind of level that you're at as well. But yeah, don't compare yourself to world class people, because like you're 18, you don't know nothing.
Nice. Yeah, some really, really good points there. I agree with a lot of what you've both said. Just in addition to that, Reese, and what you were saying there, I suppose I'd mentioned that I didn't have any expectations going in. But then, as you say, those kind of expectations that we build kind of based on our environment, I started to create very, very unrealistic expectations, kind of based off of that thing of like maybe feeling inadequate or not feeling good enough. And that's something that I think, especially at that age, is just that's kind of at the forefront of our minds a lot of the time. Because I remember feeling that way and setting ridiculous goals for like my final performance in the degree level. I wanted to kind of dive deep into the technique of a lot of virtuosos, and my program was refined from things like there was a couple of things on the program, but at the level I was, it was extremely unrealistic. I had things like wanting to play a Yngwie Malmsteen song, I wanted to play an Eddie Van Halen song, I wanted to play a Buckethead song, like all these virtuosos that like have obviously crafted their guitar skills over however many years, and I just wanted to condense it all into one academic year. It was so unrealistic, but there's actually a lot of value in that. I think shooting for the stars is still important, because if you don't shoot for the stars, if you give yourself that very realistic roof that you want to hit, there's less growth. So if you're extremely unrealistic with what you expect of yourself, although you could maybe connotate it with coming from a negative space, there is a lot of benefit from that as well. But moving on from there, I think if we were to say share one piece of advice for anyone looking to study music, what would it be? Reese, shall I start with you?
Yeah. One piece of advice. Oh man, I feel like it's so hard just to give one piece of advice, because there's so many things I learned that were just so difficult that I would like to add to it. So apologies if I give more than one, but the first one is be kind to yourself. Realize that you're a student and you're starting at the beginning of a degree. It's like you shouldn't know it all. Really, you shouldn't. It's like you're there to learn. And I guess the other thing I would say is just be aware that everything you're doing is leading up to a bigger picture. And that bigger picture might not be a degree in itself. That might just be one path. The bigger picture for me would be developing myself as a musician. I don't really mind what my degree qualification is in the end. It's, these 4 years are just a step to something much bigger. And the end result is not, for me, the piece of paper that I got. So there's my bit of advice.
Oh, I have to follow that. I'm like you in that I feel like I have a lot of pieces of advice to give to give in this situation. I'm going to take it from the slightly different avenue, kind of like I was reiterating before about understand really what it is that you want from music school. Hopefully before you go, we are all in the place that, for me, I sort of, not unconsciously, but I went off to music school perhaps without asking the right questions that I perhaps really would have benefited from. So if you are listening to this, or you're thinking about this as well, and you are actually asking these questions, which is a really good thing to do, or perhaps, you want to return to study or change your major, that sort of thing, have a realistic view of what success would look like as soon as you graduate. And I think off the back of that as well is that, I had a senior lecturer who gave me a really, really good piece of advice. And I just try to share it with everybody, which is really that those first 2 years of graduating are incredibly tough, because it's all about trying to put things into perspective. All this stuff that you learn and how you get gigs and how you balance things, how you make money. It always is hard. It's always hard those first 2 years. But if you can stick that out and you have a clear vision for perhaps what it is that you want to do, or perhaps, your vision is simply to just take on lots of things, what I would say is just stick with it, and you will absolutely, find returns if you're willing to work hard enough as well. But yeah, there are absolutely opportunities out there. That would be my piece of advice as well. And so I'm saying that both to my younger self and to hopefully anybody that would help. But
Nice. Yeah, great stuff. For me, I think it is tough, as you say, Reese. It's tough to kind of choose one. But for me, I think it's super important to think about those college years as building your reputation. As someone who's a reliable musician, I think we all have definitely had our fair share of people who may be fantastic musicians, but sometimes it's hard to maybe rely on certain musicians if you're in a band scenario, like things like that. So it can be a very challenging part of the process. But I think being a reliable person that people can depend on is going to get you more work, and that kind of leads me on to the next thing, which is, as you said, Reese, the bit of paper honestly hasn't served me. It really hasn't. It's more been about, what did I do? How did I hold myself? How did I kind of take myself through those years of study that, you know, led people to go, oh, there's an opportunity here to maybe get into a music school to teach. I thought you'd be really good for the job. It's those things that really kind of determine, were those years of study actually worth it? So I think trying to build a good reputation and be a reliable, a good musician, but not just in terms of like technically good. It's like, be a good person as well.
Nice one. Great. Well, Callum, thanks so much for hosting that question. That was it was really fun for me to hear about everybody else's perspective, and also kind of, nostalgic in a way for me to dig back into those parts of my memory and think, what was it like? And I still remember going for my audition and how I felt that day. And so, yeah, good question. And remember, if you, the listener, would like to submit a question, please send it in to us on Instagram at sittingin, or email us at sittinginpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll consider your question. Last thing, finally, is if you want to support the podcast, I've just drunk a smoothie out of my Guitar Fuel mug, but you can get a nice Guitar Fuel mug or a swanky Sitting In top, and all proceeds go to help support what we're doing here at the podcast. And yeah, well, looking forward to next one. We shall see you next week. Have a great week, and peace and love. I'll probably take that peace and love out of it, but it's fine. See ya.